Welcome back to Investigate Joe Rogan, the podcast where I investigate things that have been said on the Joe Rogan Experience. Today I will be taking a look at episode 1830 of JRE with Meghan Murphy. If you've been listening to Investigate Joe Rogan for a while, if you are a long-time listener, you probably know that this is the exact type of guest that I do not like. I do not care for Meghan Murphy. I will say that up front right now, and I will elaborate on this further towards the end. But for now, the first thing I'll talk about is something Rogan has been saying for a few episodes now, which is that the term working people or working class is bad because he says everybody works. Now, obviously, the real reason Rogan dislikes this term is because he feels guilty on some level for being obscenely wealthy, but that is besides the point. It is not a bad term, working class, and in fact, not everybody works. The civilian participation rate, which is the statistic that gets rid of children basically, is currently at 62%. That means that about 40% of people do not have jobs for whatever reason. They are retired, they're students, they're NEETs, they are idle rich, they're stand-up comedians, they're Twitch streamers, and so on. Not everybody works, is what I'm getting at here. And people who don't work are a large and legitimate demographic. It is something to think about, and I actually suspect it has huge consequences for how people think. So I think he's wrong about this. Maybe this is not what he really means, but whatever he means, I think the non-workers of the world should be viewed as a sort of group. Rogan had another unhelpful insight from this lengthy conversation with a Canadian blogger. He asks, if we have $40 billion to give to Ukraine, why not just spend that money on free healthcare instead? The problem here is that Rogan doesn't understand how much things cost. The lowball, Bernie-approved estimates for how much free healthcare, aka Medicare for all, would cost are in the area of $30 trillion over the next 10 years. That would be $3 trillion a year. For reference, the federal government only spent $6.8 trillion total last year. So the $40 billion we sent to Ukraine could pay for roughly 0.1% of that free healthcare estimate. Essentially nothing. That would get you like one shot. We could vaccinate one child for that. People are shocked when they see a number like 40 billion because they imagine a person having 40 billion. But 40 billion is pretty much nothing. It would only be 0.5% of last year's federal budget. You can still say, yeah, free healthcare would be good. I don't care about Joe Rogan. Free healthcare would be a good idea because I'm dying, or whatever excuse you have this time, liberals. Or maybe, you're like Rogan and you think people shouldn't have to worry about healthcare because they need to be able to pursue their dreams of being a stand-up comedian. Whatever it is, that's fine. But you do have to be realistic about the amount of money it would cost. $40 billion is not going to help. If someone offered me $40 billion, I wouldn't even care. I would hang up and go back to sleep. Or go back to watching anime. It's really not a big deal. Now, moving on to my favorite topic, Twitter. I love discussing Twitter, and that's why I like these types of guests so much. That's partially why. Rogan says that after Elon Musk moved to buy Twitter, he gained 900,000 followers, basically implying that Twitter had manipulated their algorithm to prevent him from becoming more popular. Now, basically every single guest who has ever come on Joe Rogan says this. And basically every guest says that they're shadow banned in some way and that Twitter is screwing them. It could not possibly just be because they are less popular than other people. But anyway, this doesn't really make sense because Elon Musk doesn't actually have any control over Twitter. But I looked into it anyway, and Rogan did in fact gain a few 100,000 followers, more than he normally does, during the time that Elon Musk was trying to buy Twitter, and that whole thing was in the news. I suspect that this was simply because Elon Musk is sort of part of the Roganverse, and so the whole thing brought more attention to Joe Rogan. Anyway, now on to the real issues. The legality of watching porn in different public settings. Rogan and Murphy discussed this quite a bit actually, without coming to any real conclusions. Luckily, I have the real conclusions for you right now. I know you were all wondering about this ever since this episode of JRE came out. Rogan says that it is illegal to watch porn at the library and wonders if it is similarly illegal to watch porn on an airplane. It is not actually illegal to watch porn at the library. There are not laws about this, and nobody can stop you. The same goes for planes, although the crew could decide to kick you off the flight. So you should wait until you're in the air, is what I'm saying. I have a new episode coming out soon where I demonstrate all of this in real time, in real life, in a much less theoretical way than I'm talking about here. That will just be for the Patreon, though. That's not for the general public. Rogan also wonders how laws on planes even work since they pass through international airspace. Unlike the porn-related stuff, I already knew all about this because I frequently transport things on planes that are legal in some places but not in others. Again, this is a topic more suited just for the Patreon since I really cannot be dropping that kind of knowledge on just anyone. You probably aren't ready for that. But when a plane is on the ground, the laws of the country it's in apply. This supersedes everything else. Then when it is in international airspace, the laws of the country that the plane is registered in apply. If a plane registered in one country flies into the airspace of another country, that country's laws will apply in certain circumstances. These are very important things to keep in mind. Rogan and Meghan Murphy have left me with little to talk about here, even though their conversation lasted over 3 hours. So for the rest of this episode, I'm going to get kind of meta and talk about Meghan Murphy, the human being. First of all, she's an alcoholic. She's been drunk both of the times she's come on JRE. She frequently contradicts herself while discussing her alcohol abuse with Joe Rogan. At one point, she says she frequently takes 13 shots or more when she goes out. And then later, she says she doesn't do shots because they make her throw up. She says she stays up all night working. She's nocturnal. But also, she says she works during the day, so she never gets any sunlight. She says she works every day, but also says she doesn't work Thursday because that's karaoke night. Karaoke, of course, being code word for more heavy binge drinking. She also says she tries not to work on Friday or the weekend, presumably, once again, for heavy binge drinking. So she says she works 24/7, but this would leave her with just 3 days a week to post on her Substack and do all the work she does. Why is she so all over the place? Well, it's because she's drunk. She doesn't know what's happening. Her big thing is claiming to be against the very idea of having an ideology. She says having an ideology is bad. You don't need to watch a 2-hour Zizek lecture about this to know that this is dumb. Everyone has an ideology. She is obviously an ideologue, and in fact, all she talks about is her ideology. She claims to not be a leftist. Her Substack is called something like Leaving the Left, Women Leaving the Left. But also she said that she supports free healthcare and free college. Too bad, you are a leftist. It doesn't matter what you want. She could claim to not be an alcoholic as well, but this would not change the reality of the situation. They talk about her romantic life for some reason. And she says, "I'm pretty difficult. I can't help it." And proceeds to explain how she's single because she's just too real and can't help but always say what she's thinking and being honest and just hitting people with what's on her mind. What's funny about this is you never hear people who are really nice say this. it's never like, oh, I just have to say it like it is. And then they go around complimenting people and being pleasant. People who say this are just using it as an excuse to be a dick to everyone, and they should be avoided in real life at all costs. People who are unapologetically and self-described as difficult are really people you do not want to interact with. I know this is not an advice podcast, not yet. Eventually it will be, and I will tell all of you to get your welding license and your forklift operating license, and you have to lift weights and so on, and that will be what the podcast is in the future. But for now, that is my very basic advice. Avoid people who are very mean and disguise this by saying that they are just honest. She is from Canada, but she moved to Mexico basically because she got banned from Twitter. Nobody has ever taken Twitter as seriously as this woman. This is embarrassing. She is an embarrassment to Canadians, to Mexicans, to white people, to women, to liberals, but also to conservatives in a weird way, to alcoholics, to Substack writers. She's just a mess. She's a walking disaster. She was the worst guest in a long time. And I would like to see Kristen Beck beat her in a women's bathroom as punishment. That being said, I kind of liked this episode in a weird way. However, I do not wish for her to ever return. Thank you for listening. There are a bunch of bonus episodes that you can get for $2 on Patreon, and so on. I don't know what I'm going to do next. Probably Tim Kennedy, another person who I despise. That'll be great, listening to that. I bet it's like 4 hours. Thanks for listening to this. This is probably going to be like 5 minutes. See you next episode.